Hey crafty people, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd, because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. Over the years I've dabbled in most types of crafting, although for the past decade or so I've been doing primarily card making and mixed media art. I've recently embarked on a junk journaling journey that I hope you'll join me on. Okay, so I've gone ahead and done a bit of prep work, and I am using the Tim Holtz Sizzix cats. It's called Mischievous, and I do not have the number off the top of my head. And the die set comes with your cat shapes, and it also comes with separate heads so that you can, add a little bit more. Ooh, my cat's tails are in a knot. You can add a little bit more dimension by adding a head on and popping it up. And I want to point out the genius thing Sizzix has done is all of the cat dies are numbered on the back, and then the corresponding heads are numbered so that you can easily match up and know which ones to cut out, which I think is fantastic. I've also die cut out, this is the Spellbinders postage stamp die set. I'll leave the exact name down below because I don't remember what it is off of my top of my head. So I've die cut out that, and I have gone into my stash and grabbed a cupcake stamp. And this is an Inkadinkado stamp, and it is old. This is probably one of the first stamp sets I ever bought. So it is a very old stamp. I die cut this out of just regular old cardstock because I'm not in the mood to pull out my Copics for this project. So I don't need to use my Copic Express It paper that I use when coloring with Copic markers. And I'm just pulling out my Misty to stamp my cupcake onto the little postage stamp here. And I'm going to stick it down there, and actually I am going to clean it off because I've had it sitting out and it's got some like dust on the back of it, which will make it not stick very well. So just cleaning it off to hopefully get it to stick nicely. And of course I got the front a little damp, so let's make sure our paper's nice and dry before we stamp. And because I'm not using my Misty, I'm gonna go ahead and grab VersaFine in Onyx Black. And it's a pigment ink. I'm gonna go ahead and just stamp it. Ooh, and that came out lovely. And I'm gonna set this aside to dry because pigment inks take a minute to dry. So I'm just gonna set that off to the side. And I've got 3 of the cats that I'm gonna use on this project. I did die cut it out of Canson XL watercolor cardstock because I think I'm gonna go ahead and use my Distress inks to color these guys. Let's match up my heads with my cats so that I make sure I color the heads the right color. Because, yeah, that'd be bad. All right, let's start with this guy who's getting into all kinds of trouble. And I think we're gonna start with dried Marigold, which I know seems like a strange color, but I'm gonna do an orange cat, so. I'm just gonna smush him around in here. And do the same with the head. Add a little more color down, and while it's still wet, because wet on wet will blend wet on dry layers, So I'm just gonna rub them around a little bit more in the dried marigold. And the same with the head. And now I'm gonna pull out my heat tool and dry them off. Just gonna grab a paintbrush and get a little bit more color on the cat's head. So basically I'm just kind of watercoloring with my Distress inks. Now I am gonna grab Spiced Marmalade. I'm gonna pull out an acrylic block so I don't make a mess on my craft table. And I'm gonna get a paintbrush. Just add a little water to my block so that I can wet my paintbrush. And go into my Spiced Marmalade and start adding stripes to our kitty cat. Now let's add a little bit of striping on the leg. Now for the back, I'm gonna do it thicker at the body, the back, you know, the edge, and come in thin. If that makes any sense. So what I'm doing is I'm starting thicker at the edge of the piece and bringing it kind of into a point to make the stripes on the side of the body. And I'm gonna do something similar on the head. I don't have to do that head because we're gonna have this guy on top. And I'm just gonna start, I'm gonna do one stripe across the front of the nose, there, like front of the nose, top of the head, down to where the nose would be. And then I'm gonna do same thing on either side over here. So thicker at the edge, thinning out as we go up. And then I'm gonna do the tips of the ears. So there's our first cat. Set those aside so they can dry completely. I'm gonna bring in this cat and I am gonna start with Lost Shadow. And so I'm just gonna smush a little Lost Shadow onto my mat. Spritz. Smush my cat around. Get them all gray. Do the same thing for the head. to dry them. Bring them back in and get a little bit more color on them. Don't want them to get too dark because we're going to be adding stripes to this guy too. So let's dry that one off. And we're pretty much going to do the same thing we did with the first guy for this cat. And we're going to use Hickory Smoke for our darker color. And I'm hoping it's going to be dark enough. May need to pull in the black. I'm going to start on the tail. Make sure our stripes are dark enough. And again, like I did with the other cat, for the body, I'm going to start at the edge and thin my little stripes out. Over here. I'll probably do that here too. Please excuse dog barking. And then maybe one more over here. A little bit of a stripe on the feet. And now we'll move on to our head. And we're going to do it pretty much the same way we did the other one. Little stripe coming down the nose area. One on the side of the head, this side. One on this side. And a little bit on the tip of the ear. And a little bit on the tip of this ear. And we're going to set that guy aside. Now for the last one, I'm going to do something a little different. We're not going to stripe it because, you know, not all cats are striped. So for this guy, I think what I want to try doing is mixing a little Lost Shadow and tea dye to see what we get. Because there are some brown tones, undertones to the Lost Shadow. So I think it's going to make an interesting kitty cat color if we mix our brown and our gray. Just going to swirl our kitty around in that. And yeah, I kind of like that. That's kind of giving me a little bit Siamese vibe color-wise. So we may add the pointing that you see on a Siamese to this guy. Yeah, that's giving me Siamese cat feel. I'm gonna just let that dry because I want to go check and make sure I put my Siamese cat pointing colors in the right spots. Okay, so we're gonna make this one a Siamese cat, and I've got a little Lost Shadow and ground espresso on my block that I'm gonna mix together. And so the Siamese has got the dark coloring on its tail and its feet. And its face and the tips of the ears. So let's do the tips of the ears. And we're gonna just pull it out like that because the shape seems to be more like that. So there's our last kitty cat. Now I'm gonna set those guys aside to dry. And while they're drying, let's work on our cupcake. Stick it on my cutting mat so I have a firmer surface to work on. I'm gonna pull out colored pencils, and I'm grabbing, this is a Crayola light orange. This one's Prismacolor Sand, just to kind of give a vanilla cupcake feel underneath. And then I'm grabbing Prismacolor Cadmium Orange Hue for the wrapper. Now I'm gonna grab a paper blending stub, grabbing an emery board just to clean it off so I make sure I'm not mixing colors I don't want to mix here, and some baby oil. I'm gonna put a little baby oil on my blending stump. And use that to blend out my pencil marks. Then I'm just going to go straight into the bottom because it's a darker shade of what I was using on top using the same blending stump. Now, you can also use odorless mineral spirits to blend your colored pencils if you don't like the streakiness of, unblended pencil lines. I used to use odorless mineral spirits, but They're odorless, not fumeless, and couldn't understand why I kept getting headaches when crafting until it finally dawned on me it was the fumes from the odorless mineral spirits. So I stopped using those and switched to baby oil. I will admit that the odorless mineral spirits works better at blending than the baby oil, but the baby oil is a decent second. And it doesn't give me a headache to use. So that's what I use for wet blending of colored pencils. And I need to go wash my hands because I have ink on my hands and I'm going to get it where I don't want it. So I'll be right back. So I've got my card base. It is 5.5 by 4.25. I have this piece of paper that's going to go on the bottom as the background base for our card, and it is a printable by Bontank Vintage Designs. I will leave a link down below. And I picked this out because when I make cards for friends, I like to gear my cards towards their personality. So this friend likes cats and loves Paris. So that's why I'm using this digital with the image of the Eiffel Tower for the base of my card. So that's going to go on like that. I am going to glue that down in a second. And then this piece will go on like that with our one kitty climbing over. Our Siamese is going to be sitting down here at the bottom. And actually, this is going to get shifted over a little bit because the idea is to have the Eiffel Tower peeking out from behind our image. And then our last cat, who seems to have disappeared, okay, this guy, is going to be peeking up over top. All right, we got to come down a little bit so our kitty cat's head's on the card. And we're over as far as we can go, and our Siamese cat can pop up like that. And what I may do is just glue the cat's tail down so it's a little more out, so that we have our Eiffel Tower peeking out and our kitty cats. Now, we're gonna pop up the heads when we put them on, but first I want to give them eyeballs. So I've grabbed my Uniball white. I'm gonna grab some scratch paper and make sure it's writing. And gonna give them a little eyeballs. And then I'm gonna wait for those to dry. And then I've got my mono drawing pen, and this is 01. And make sure they're dry first. Yep. All right. And I'm gonna go in. Not loving, there we go. Alright, I am grabbing a different pen because this one is not cooperating. I'm gonna grab my Sharpie, and this is an ultra fine tip. Goodness gracious, come on. All right, that one's not working very well. Let's see. Let's try pulling out my Copic multi-liner and see if that one will cooperate. Copic multi-liner for the win. Feel like they need a nose. but I'm afraid to put in a nose. And to help with our Siamese cat's nose, which you can barely see, I'm gonna come back with the white pen and put a little highlight on the nose. Actually, I think I might just do the nose in white. Let it dry and go over it mostly in black, so it's got a little white edging to it so that it'll stand out better. While that's drying, let's go ahead and start our assembly here. I'm gonna use my art glitter glue. Oh no, actually this is barely art glue to attach the base down. And I've got a little white showing at the top, so I'm gonna grab some scissors and just trim that off. Now, I'm gonna start attaching my cats to this piece because I've got them coming up from behind in spots. So I'm just gonna stick it on again to make sure I've got the cats where I want the cats before I start gluing them on. And actually, I want to ink the edges of this so it is a little more set off. So, and I'm gonna grab Spice Marmalade for this first, because I'm gonna try and get a good amount of the stampy edge inked, because I don't know if you can see when it die cuts, it kind of indents a line. So I'm gonna kind of try and ink up to that line in the Spice Marmalade. I'm gonna set this down and just try and get a little bit more smooth up like that. Probably should not be doing it on something that's got pencil on it, because I'm pulling up the pencil. So I'm gonna grab a white scratch piece of paper. I like that better, but I also want to add a little brown on the edges. And I'm just going with whatever ink's left on this dauber. Okay, so now that we've got that inked, let's get our cats placed. So that's gonna go there-ish. He's gonna peek out over the top like that. Let's move him over a little bit more. I think, yeah, that's where we're gonna do that. And then pull his tail out a little bit. I think, yes. Yes. Okay, we're gonna start gluing these guys down because the Siamese cat kind of is a little easier in the placing. So I'm gonna add a little glue back here for his legs and hold his legs in place. And then this guy's going here. So let's glue his body down. So yeah, I ended up coloring more than I needed to on the cats, but I wasn't entirely sure where this guy was gonna go when all was said and done. And it's just easier sometimes to color the whole thing, even if it ends up getting covered up, than figuring out in advance what parts aren't gonna show. All right, let's glue his feet down. All right, and that's gonna go right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue this down so I don't have to worry about it, but I'm not gonna add glue to his tail yet. Let's just add a little back here though. All right, let's try and get it placed correctly. I think it's far enough over. His head's on the thing, so we're far enough down. All right, now I'm gonna add some more glue to our, oh, that part of the tail's got glue on it. Let's glue the rest of the tail down. And we're gonna come back in on our Siamese and fill in his nose. There we go. Now I've got some foam squares. Oh, I've got to glue the cattail down. Let's do that. So we're gonna add glue to his tail and kind of pull it out so that it's not blocking our Eiffel Tower. I just hold that down for a sec while it dries. And our Siamese cat, I think, is gonna go right like that. So let's glue him down and then we can add the heads. And let's add some foam squares to our kitty cat heads. And I'm actually going to add a little glue to my foam squares because I've had foam squares over the years eventually lose their stickiness. There's that one. All right, I gotta wait a sec for that to dry because it keeps trying to pull up the foam square instead of the backing. My life a little easier and use my tweezers to hold it. Add a little glue and stick him on there. And then our last kitty cat's head. So here we go. We've got our Mischievous cat's birthday celebration in Paris. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting!